What's up? This is Kevin Dana of the Santa Cruz Warriors, and you're rocking with my guy Tanner Oda on the Crossed Over podcast.
The national championship games are set. It's UConn versus South Carolina today for the NCAA Women's Championship, and Florida versus Houston tomorrow for the NCAA Men's Championship. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crossover Podcast. Today, we will be breaking down the national championship games along with some predictions on who will be cutting down the nets. So, first, let's talk about the NCAA Women's Championship game between the UConn Huskies and the South Carolina Gamecocks. This game is today, April 6th. At 12 p.m. and streaming on ABC, ESPN, and ESPN+. The first thing to note, and the first thing that comes to my mind at least, is that this is a rematch of the 2022 NCAA Women's Championship game in which South Carolina won. So a little bit of revenge for UConn. Obviously, not all the players on this current UConn team were on that 2022 team, a few. And of course, Dawn Staley was coaching that South Carolina team as she's been the coach of this historic program for many years now. But nevertheless, it's a rematch. It's going to taste a little sweeter for UConn if they can pull this out. But also because South Carolina is a defending champion. UConn is in a quote-unquote national championship drought because that's the expectations of their program. So this is a big game either way. South Carolina, if they win this national championship, they will have won 3 of the last 4. The lone one not belonging to them the last 4 years would be 2023 when LSU took down Iowa. South Carolina did, however, make that Final Four. This is their 5th straight Final Four appearance. Yes, South Carolina's 5th straight Final Four appearance. To get here, South Carolina took down Texas. They played Texas 4 times this year. SEC play, they did a home and home. South Carolina won in South Carolina. Texas won in Texas. And then in the SEC tournament, South Carolina took down Texas in the SEC final. And then in the Final Four, South Carolina took care of business again and beat Texas again. UConn destroyed top overall seed UCLA, which was a bit of a surprise. I personally thought that UConn would win that game just because of the momentum they were coming in with. But the way they took care of UCLA, just the pure dominance throughout the game basically was very, very shocking to me. But UConn is a very good team. And let's get to our first of 2 predictions for the winners. I think that UConn is taking this one home. Here's a stat for you. UConn has not won a game by less than 14 points throughout this tournament. That is how dominant they have been. And honestly, none of their games have really been much closer than 14 or much closer besides their 14-point win over USC. Now, of course, they're missing Juju Watkins, who has been racking up awards lately. Good for her. But the point is, UConn has been dominating the competition throughout the tournament. They won their first round game by a total of around 70 points. They took down the top overall seed UCLA by 25 points. They beat USC, the number 1 seed in the region. And of course, like I said, Juju Watkins was out by 14. They've been taking care of business throughout the entire tournament. And this is not to downplay South Carolina. South Carolina is a very, very, very talented squad. And of course, if they win, nobody's going to be surprised. However, they have been battle tested multiple times. Of course, they were dominant over Texas in the Final Four win. However, Elite Eight, they only beat Duke by 4. Duke could have won that game. They turned the ball over way too many times down the stretch. If they don't do that, you can make a fair argument for Duke winning that game. Sweet 16, they barely took care of Maryland by about 4 points. These type of games just make you think, what happens when South Carolina runs into UConn, which they will? It's a really, really good question that we will find out today. And I think that UConn has the edge here. I think they're playing with a lot more momentum, a lot more confidence, and I think they have something to prove. South Carolina won last year. UConn hasn't won in a while. Paige Beckers hasn't won a national championship. She's going to be hungry today. The whole UConn squad, I think, will be I think they'll want this one more, and I think with all this confidence, all this momentum, they're going to come in and beat South Carolina for revenge in the 2022 championship. But also because most of the people on this UConn squad haven't won a national championship, if yet not any at all. So South Carolina coming off a national championship, don't be surprised if they win at all. Of course, obviously this team is very very good. And then the last thing to mention though, why I'm taking UConn. Earlier in the season, we go back to mid February. These two teams met in Columbia, South Carolina, and UConn took care of business. They won by around 25 points. I was watching part of that game. UConn looked like a much better team. Now, this is 2 months later, 1.5 months later. Completely different, completely different game. This is a national championship game. I just think UConn has the edge because of their confidence, their momentum, and they have something to prove. And I think they are going to prove it today. Now let's move on to the men's national championship. Florida versus Houston. That game is tomorrow, Monday, April 7th at 5:50 p.m. and streaming on CBS. Oh man, this game to me feels like it's like 50-50 on the winner. That's how I kind of feel is this really could go either way. The two Final Four games that led up to this matchup were fantastic. Florida took care of SEC rival Auburn. They came back. Florida was really the team showing like really identity shaping for Florida in the second half, and they really controlled that second half over Auburn because Auburn had the most of the momentum. They played better in the first half. Auburn did, but then Florida came in, and it just looked like they were the team to beat in the second half, and they took care of business. It looked like, of course, Auburn being as good as they are, fought back hard, but to me, Florida just looked much better, much more composed down the stretch, making bigger plays down the stretch, controlling the game in such a way that winning teams do, national championship teams do. And that's why in the beginning I had Florida over Auburn, is because I believe that when it really comes down to it, I think Florida can execute in clutch moments better than Auburn can. And that's what they showed. However, their opponent, Houston, what a comeback over Duke. Down 14 with about 8-9 minutes left in the second half, and down 9 with about 3.5 minutes left. This game looked like it was in Duke's favor. It was in Duke's favor for basically the entire game until about 20 seconds left, where Cooper Flag was called for a controversial over the back on a rebounding a free throw, which gave Houston a 1-and-1, in which they went from down 1 to up 1, and they never let go of that lead. Cooper Flag got a really, really good look at a mid-range jumper fading away, but very well contested by his defender from Houston, and Houston knocked down the two free throws, played really good defense, and won the game. But the real story to me, or the real talking point for Houston down the stretch, was their suffocating defense, their full court defense. This is why they came back. They were down around 7 points with about 120 left, and I would say maybe around the 55-second mark, just around there. They start doing this full court press. I'm not sure if Duke scored after they did that. Actually, I believe that maybe they had one free throw. But besides that, that's when Houston went on their run. And it was just an incredible sight to see. They were playing fantastic defense. And to be honest, we've seen this from Houston all year long. If you guys remember the Kansas-Houston game at Allen Fieldhouse, when Houston was down 6 with about 15 seconds left, hit a 3, then played full court defense and hit another 3 and then won in overtime. That's what this reminded me of. It's like they've been doing this all year. Houston has known how to they've played from behind at points in this year where they put in this full court defense and they execute and they come back and win. And that's what they did versus Duke. It looked so good. Duke they just didn't look like they knew how to get out of that press. They really didn't. And maybe it's because Houston's been battle tested a few more times throughout the tournament. They have had close games against like Purdue. Duke, besides that Arizona game, which was close, but Duke had control the whole time. they've kind of destroyed everybody in this tournament. Houston's been battle tested. I think that's what it came down to, was that Houston knew how to execute in these moments. I don't think Duke wasn't used to it. And Houston showed, you know, they were the better team down the stretch. Even, 1 minute down the stretch, because Duke just like Houston was making these runs, Duke would respond again and again, and then they put in that press, and Duke could not do anything. They got steals, they got jump balls, they got, put back layups and dunks, and they just started crawling their back way back in this game, and they won. Houston won. They advanced to the national championship, right? It was just an incredible game. Go watch the highlights if you have an opportunity to. It was incredible. Now, who do I think will win this game? Like I said, to me, this matchup is like it's like a coin toss on who could win. It feels about 50-50. It could go really, really could go either way, honestly. I have Houston winning this game, which it's so tough for me to pick a winner. It really is. But I think the advantage that Houston has, I think they're a little more physical, though Florida is very, very physical. But I think down the stretch, both of these teams play very, very well down the stretch, by the way. I think Houston has a slight advantage. I think they're coming of. Oh, it's so hard. You can see me just struggling just to even talk about a winner. It's so hard. I just have Houston. I feel like they're coming in with somewhat more momentum because of that comeback win. To me, they look like they have the edge, but like I said, it's so hard to pick a winner, but it's going to be a great game. Florida versus Houston is going to be a fantastic national championship. I believe one will become a game that goes, one of those games that goes back and forth, basically the entire game. And, you really don't know the winner until the final buzzer rings. Like, it's going to come down to the last few possessions. What a game. I just thinking about it, what a game this is going to be. What a game UConn, South Carolina is going to be today as well. We have such a treat from college basketball fans of these two national championship games. They are just going to be so fantastic. That is it for today's episode of the Crossover Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and have fun watching these fantastic national championship games.